Hello, everyone, and welcome to TDWI's webinar program. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Linda Briggs. I'm an editor here at TDWI, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Our program today has a great title, Taming BI and Analytics Chaos, the Data Catalog to the Rescue. Our sponsor is Alation. And for our speakers today, first up will be Claudia Imhoff with Intelligent Solutions, and then we have a presentation by Kalb with Alation. Before I turn the stage over to Claudia to get started, just a few background items for the audience. Today's webinar will be about an hour long. At the end of the speaker presentations, they're going to host a question and answer period. That is a great opportunity for you to get your questions answered around this topic, so I encourage you to type in a question at any time during either presentation, send it over, and as I said, we'll get to as many of those as we can toward the end of the hour. If you run into any technical issues, there's a help area there in your slide window. Feel free to make use of that. And if you're a Twitter user and you'd like to discuss this webinar on Twitter with fellow attendees, please feel free to do that. Include the hashtag TDWI in your tweets if you would. For a copy of today's presentation, there's a line on your console. You can download a PDF immediately. Also, as always, we're recording today's webinar. We will be emailing each of you a link to the archive. You can revisit the entire webinar yourselves or share that link with a colleague who may not have been able to make it today. We encourage you to do that. Okay, once again, our program is entitled Taming BI and Analytics Chaos, the Data Catalog to the Rescue. Speaking first today is Dr. Claudia Imhoff. She is president and founder of Intelligent Solutions. A thought leader, visionary, and practitioner, Claudia is an internationally recognized expert on analytics, business intelligence, and the architectures to support these initiatives. She's co-authored 5 books on these subjects and written over 150 articles for technical and business magazines. Claudia is also the founder of the Boulder BI Brain Trust, BBBT, an international consortium of independent analysts and experts. You can follow them on Twitter at hashtag BBBT, or you can become a subscriber at bbbt.us. So welcome, Claudia. Always great to have you on the program.
Always good to be with you, excuse me, with you, Linda. I certainly am very happy to be here today, and especially very thankful to both TDWI and Alation for giving me the wonderful opportunity to talk to all of you today. Indeed, I do encourage you to submit your questions if you have them, and tweet away. You know, I'll be reading the Twitter stream at the end of the hour as well, so I'd like to hear what you have to say. Let me start off with my agenda, and then I'm going to turn it over to Linda, and then we'll hear from Aaron. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the information worker as a hunter-gatherer. It's an interesting little quote there. Then I'm going to talk about the data catalog, what it is, and some of the benefits from it and so forth. And we're going to talk about a number of use cases where I see the real value of the data catalog in your organizations. And then, as always, I always end on a little getting started piece, a little practical piece on, you told me all this stuff, now how do I get started on it? So we'll talk about that as well. My first slide is an interesting one. It's rather complex, but that's exactly the point. It's a very complex analytics environment these days. Let's start on the left-hand side because that's kind of where we logically start in any architecture, it seems like. And that's with the data sources. Yeah, we've still got operational data, and yeah, we still have historical data warehousey kind of data. But we've got so much more than that. We've got weird data, what I call weird data. It's in weird formats. It comes from weird places. There's text and media, web and social content, and then, of course, the Internet of Things, just spewing all sorts of sensor data at us. The volumes are massive these days, and of course the rates of change are also extreme. Sub-second changes in many different things. Now let's look at the stack to the right of that, and we'll start at the bottom there as well, because when we finally get a hold of the data, then we have multiple ways of deploying it. Do we put it into the cloud? Do we put it on premises? More likely it's going to be some kind of hybrid environment where we've got a little there, and a little over there too. And then of course the technologies. We have such a variety now of technologies. It's not just relational DBMSs, it's NoSQL ones, it's appliances, it's all over the place. We also have multiple user devices, good heavens. And everybody's got a different kind of cell phone, and they want to be able to see their analytics on their cell phone or on their desktop or their tablet or fill in the blank, whatever else. Let's go to the top, and we're going to look at the sophisticated analytics and complex analytic workloads. Boy, in the last 5 years, we have really ramped up the level, the level of sophistication in our analytic workflows. We're now able to do things that are just phenomenal. Data science is taken off like a rocket, right? So we've got all kinds of workloads that are some simple and some very complex. And then the last one at the top, the multiple outputs. Yeah, is it a report, a dashboard? Is it some kind of a story? Is it a visualization? Is it something else altogether? So we've got all kinds of outputs as well. Now, without that red box in the middle, I got to tell you that the 5 things that I've talked about, the sources, the deployment options, the user devices, the workloads, and finally the formats, all of that can become total chaos, absolutely total chaos with everybody doing their own thing. And that's where the red box comes in, the box in the middle. And it's made up of 4 different things. The first one, of course, is data integration, which includes data prep and all of that. But where we need to physically integrate the data together, or are we just prepping it for data science, or is it even a virtual connection to the data? It's important to monitor and manage those types of things. The data management piece is becoming more and more critical in this environment, and that's where the data catalog is going to fall in. How do I manage the massive amounts of sources of data, of sources of analytics, and so forth? How do I manage that environment? How do I govern it? Big question there. How do I make sure that I'm in compliance and so forth? We'll get into that more. And then the next one over to the right is data analysis, the actual analytics themselves. Can I find them? Are they using the right algorithms? Are they using the right sets of data? Do I have questions about why the data still does, or the analytics still don't match my own homegrown analytics? So the analysis side as well is must be governed in some way, shape, or form. And then the last one is a really interesting one. I'm not seeing it happening a lot these days, but it's becoming more and more popular. And that's the actual management or monitoring of the decisions that we make with all of our data assets. In other words, if someone made a bad decision, I don't want to punish them for that bad decision. I want to analyze what data assets they used that caused them to reach that decision so that I can determine what's wrong with my data assets. Why did it lead them down the garden path there? So that's the complex environment that we see today. And now that I've positioned the data, the poor business user who's sitting on top of all of this, let's talk about them. We know that the data is proliferating at huge speed. We know that it's weird formats, massive volumes, and so forth. But we need all of that data because we are trying to figure out, who is this customer? What is this situation? What are the outcomes? What kinds of things should I be doing? If I don't have a full set of information, I may make a very bad decision. And of course, in creating a data-driven organization, it means that we have to quickly find the right data for each situation, for each analysis. The other part of that, though, and it's a big part, is collaboration. The collaboration between those that are analytically savvy and those that are, technologically naive, perhaps. We need to be able to share what we find, the knowledge that we understand about data and analytics throughout the organization. And that's regardless of the skill of the business community. We need to support everybody. That's how we improve the adoption of BI and analytics throughout our organization. So I'm going to read you a quote. I wish I had written it. It's a wonderful quote. It's from a fellow by the name of Jerry McGovern, and he is a writer for New Thinking newsletter. I'm just going to read it because I can't improve on it. It's a marvelous quote. Being an information worker is a bit like being a hunter-gatherer. Instead of hunting for food, you're hunting for information. The life of the information hunter-gatherer is not easy. For instead of wading through swamps and climbing treacherous mountains, this information hunter-gatherer wades through search results and stumbles through data fog. Well said. Can't improve on that one at all. All right, enter the data catalog now that I've set it up. What is it? I'm going to go to an article written by David Stoddard, my good friend and certainly an excellent writer. And he's a research director at TDWI. So there you go. You can find his article at tdwi.org. His definition, it's a kind of Rosetta Stone. It enables users, developers, administrators, anybody to find and learn about data, and for the information professionals to properly organize, integrate, curate, and I might add, govern, of course, data for their users. This is your guide. It's the guide to that often complex, often mystifying world of data analytics and so forth. Where do I find this report? How do I find this analytic? Where does this data reside and so forth? The analytical providers then have worked on this problem for decades. From the very first data warehouse 25 years ago, we were worried about metadata, the data about this environment. And we've been working on it for decades. Metadata repositories came and went. They started out in the early 1990s. They fell out of favor. Then we got more involved with it. And now finally, we've gotten a really good answer to how do we answer the question about what information is there about my data. These incredible capabilities to help the whole enterprise, and that's the data catalog. Terrific advancement in this whole area. The catalog classifies, it organizes data assets wherever they reside, whether it's in a public private cloud, some sort of hybrid environment, or it's on premises, or it's on premises. It's the first step in making sure your company is on the right path to becoming analytically driven. You take inventory of the data that you've got. You assess its value. You assess its quality. You maximize its usage by making it clear where it is and how to access it and so forth. And like I said, it should support all kinds of consumers, the non-technical as well as those that are very, very technical, those who want self-service and access to data and analytics. But it also does help the people governing this environment. It supports governance. It supports data security and compliance. So it has a wonderful position right in the middle of your analytic environment. This was a graph from a TDWI report on data management in general. The question was, from a technical perspective, what could be improved in your analytics effort to make it more successful? And you had a number of choices there. But look at number one. Number one was a data catalog. Number one. That can help me in my analytic efforts more than any of the other ones below it. Get me a data catalog. Terrific graphic. Really does explain the importance of the data catalog. All right, let me turn to benefits now. The benefits of having a catalog. Yes, again, this is from that TDWI Modern Data Catalog report. The first one up is to make the data more accessible. Let me find it. Does it exist? Where does it exist? Who do I have to talk to get access to it? The search-based metadata, the search-based interfaces, natural language processing interfaces are wonderful now. I don't have to be a whiz kid at programming. I can find the data by just speaking, right? Just writing my queries. Search-based interfaces like Google have really improved the utilization of data catalogs. The data doesn't need to move. The catalog you use the catalog instead. And there are connectors from the data catalog to the data, to the technologies that use the data, and so forth. The modern catalog, I like this one. They help democratize the data. Again, that natural language processing and search interface means that almost everyone can use this environment. Data discovery and analysis, wonderful, wonderful things to have. Crowdsourcing as well. And then, of course, the link to the analytics tools, too. Always good stuff to have. Number 3, the modern catalogs help protect and secure the data. Always good. Ensure the proper use of sensitive data, data like HIPAA data or the PII data. Do we know what's sensitive? Are we protecting it properly, and so forth? The catalogs can learn to recognize content patterns even. The content itself and the patterns that are formed from that content. They use role-based access controls for data security. Excellent. Role-based for data security. Number 4, the modern catalogs can build trust. Probably should have made that number 1. But they build trust in the data. Okay, I can see it. I can see who's written about it. I can see where it's being used. I know where it came from. I think I trust it. And of course, using automation like AI and machine learning and so forth, algorithms, to parse the large sets of data for the metadata always helps. But the key there is also data lineage and data certification and ratings. Data lineage, it came from here, it went through these processes, it ended up there. And data certification, somebody has certified that, yeah, the data is good. It's as good as it's going to get. It certainly meets our compliance requirements or anything else. And then 5, it does build a bridge to the analytics. The catalog, I can find the data in the catalog and then I can interface with the analytic solutions being used. I don't have to hop, skip all over the place, try to remember what the catalog said and then go to the tool and try to remember and put it in there. So that certainly improves all kinds of self-service capabilities. All right, let's talk about some use cases. And again, I encourage you, please do enter any question. If I said something you don't understand, or I've used an acronym that you don't understand, or you just plain don't agree with me, then by all means, go ahead and enter that into the Q&A box. But let's talk about use cases. And I think my little graphic there is so perfect. From the guy on the left, that's a 6. From the guy on the right, that's a 9, and they're going to do battle to figure out what it really is. Reconciliation, always a problem. Let's talk about the first use case, and that is, of course, finding the data. With all of these new sources, with all of these capabilities in the cloud, on-premise, how do I even know that it exists? Is there missing data, or even more importantly, duplicate data all over the place? If I can't find it, I'll make my own extract and duplicate the data. Well, if I could have found it to begin with, I could have saved myself that step. A data catalog can certainly help. It can quickly find data sets. It certainly does improve productivity and shared knowledge. And the whole goal is to flip that 80-20 rule, right? Today, if we don't have a data catalog, it takes about 80% of our time to find the data, manipulate the data, get it into a format that I can then analyze it, and then I can only spend 20% of my time analyzing it. Well, let's switch that around and make it 80% of the time I'm actually analyzing the data and 20% of the time I'm actually looking for it. Number 2 is a really critical one, and that's the impact analysis. If I change a source of my data, how does that impact a report or a dashboard or a data visualization way on down the pike? Definitions of key entities and attributes are always changing. Even algorithms are always changing. So I need to have the latest and the greatest to make sure that I understand what I'm using. Or if I'm a technical resource, if I change something, who's going to be impacted by that change? The centralized data catalog is so needed before you make any changes. You can then understand what ETL programs, schemas, reports, analyses, even users will be affected by the changes upstream from them. And it presents it both vertically. You can look through the different ETL programs and see what's going on in a vertical fashion, or horizontally from source to target. What happened to the data as it moved along the chain of integration or data prep or anything else. Number 3, mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of merging and acquiring going on these days. And when you merge or acquire a new company, you do face some rather unique problems. It's really hard to understand what data is in the different operational systems now. It's certainly difficult to analyze and merge the analytic components. You both have data warehouses. Is there overlap? Whose ETL is better than the others? What reports are duplicate? Which ones are unique and must be preserved? What ones can be reused, or better yet, which ones are never used and can be deleted? The automated centralized data catalog, again, helps here by identifying duplicate customers, for example, duplicate contact information or analytical components. It can bring to light overlapping and, unfortunately, mismatched operational data. If you have 2 different ERPs, for example, can you analyze those and figure out how do we merge this together? It can also help in the navigation and the identification of the larger enterprise as a whole. Number 4, self-service BI and analytics. Everybody wants self-service. I want to serve myself. I want to build it myself, whatever it is. Keep in mind, though, that self-service BI and analytics is not self-sufficiency. It doesn't mean that everybody in the business world wants to build it themselves, a DIY environment. A lot of business users say they want self-service when what they're really talking about is a report that has parameters so that they can select the parameters they want, or a visualization where they can lasso certain areas and expand on that, their interest in those areas. It doesn't mean they actually want to build these things themselves. So be very careful there in terms of, are you dealing with a producer of information or a consumer of information? So for a really good self-service environment, the data catalog supplies a lot of answers to the frequently asked questions. What is the algorithm used in this analytic? Who do I contact to get further information or access to that analytic? I can see it, but I can't access it, so who do I talk to? It also supplies the context, all critical context and certification information to improve self-service usage and, boy, improve adoption, expand adoption throughout the organization. Number 5, back to governance and compliance. It never goes away. It will always be with you. Governance is a critical component, especially because of the risk of exposure we have today, breaches, if you will, in security, breaches in privacy even. We've had a number of stories where people have used their analytics inappropriately. And of course, the regulations, the actual compliance itself, whether it's GDPR or CCPA or whatever new privacy act is going to come down the pike. Again, the data catalog can help us here. What data is sensitive? Where is it? Should it be under better governance controls? The analytics themselves, the assets, are they using sensitive data, and who's using those analytics? Are they aware that it has sensitive data in it? Who has access to what analytic or asset out there, whether it's data, an analytic, a report, a dashboard? Are they even authorized to such access? And then finally, can this be applied in real time? Because if it isn't real time, what's the point, right? If someone is using data that they should not be using, we need to know immediately, not in a day or a week or a month. Number 6, reduce the duplication of analysis and analytics. Boy, oh boy, that is so important. If I can't find a report quickly and easily, what am I going to do? I'm going to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to make that report again. So if I can quickly find the appropriate data or the asset, it's a significant, not just time saver, but it also stops the redundancy. More importantly, advanced data lineage can help reduce the likelihood of creating these redundant analytics. Oh, for heaven's sake, look, it already exists. Here's the report I wanted. Now all I need is access to it. So you can discover that something you need already exists. Yay, it already exists. And we eliminate that risk of reinventing the wheel over and over and over. It also means that we also get rid of a lot of redundancy. And that comes into case number 7. Determine the data flows needed for a new report or analysis. And I think this is found serendipitously. Wow, wait a minute, if I can find these redundancies, I can get rid of them. It gives analysts and developers complete information about data feeds, data repositories, views, existing analytics. They are able to create new analytic components if they have to. But automating the data flows reduces the time that it takes to create new things while ensuring the appropriateness of the data that you're using. Easy to use these visual displays of data along with their content, making it a very successful factor for this use case. And then, last one, you don't have things that add up. Right? One of the worst wastes of time for most organizations is something that nobody monitors, nobody measures, nobody puts a dollar amount on, and that's reconciliation. It's almost embarrassing to say that you had to reconcile one report with another one because it wastes everybody's time. It's non-productive, absolutely non-productive. So if my report doesn't match yours, if my analytic doesn't match yours, why? Am I missing some data? Are you missing some data? Is the data represented in different ways? Is it a different source of data? Are the reconciling reports is just such a massive waste of everybody's time and effort. The centralized data catalog can help enormously here. You can discover what the ETL processes are doing, and you can immediately see, oh, you didn't select all the customers. You're actually only looking at our top 30% of the customers. That's why these reports are not identical. You can automatically trace back to the source. Your source is slightly different from mine. You can visualize the relationships through the beautiful graphical interfaces. And of course, reduce that unproductive, non-productive effort to make sure that we have shared knowledge. All right, last little bit, and then I'll turn it back over to Linda, and we'll hear from Alation, from Aaron. Wonderful discussion that he's going to have. But let me give you just some tips on how to get started. First of all, and always first, is what do you need? What are your data requirements? Supporting the metadata fields, and believe me, this is only a partial list, and you must customize it to your needs. And I would suggest that you level it, that there are the mandatory pieces of metadata that you must have. And then there's a whole slew of other stuff that is nice to have. It's not necessary at first, but it would sure be nice to have. But you'll see here, I'm not going to read this off because it's a whole bunch of them. But a lot of it is what I've already talked about, the sources, the history, the volumes, the timeliness even, definitions, quality, and so forth. Who's responsible for it? The comments or context. What's available? The permissions for usage. Who's the creator? What algorithms did they use? Did anybody create certifications? And on it goes. Make your own list to begin with. What are the types of things that you absolutely have to have? And what are the things that, boy, sure would be nice to have? So in getting started then, first of all, know your organization. What are the use cases? Are you going after lineage? Are you going after sensitive data? Do you want to reduce redundancy or improve productivity? What is the use case? And prioritize the use cases. Then you identify the business drivers and map them to the capabilities. You make sure that the stakeholders are all on board. Are these priorities right? Are they in line with what your needs are? And then you begin to look for a data catalog vendor that can help you with this process. Then determine your requirements. Like I said, understand your data requirements, your catalog functionalities, and so forth, and make sure you prioritize them. You match the list to the prioritized use cases, and then you begin the team selection, its development, and the education about data cataloging. Then pick your approach. Are you going to do a small proof of concept to begin with? Are you going to perhaps focus on one domain of data as opposed to one project? Keep in mind that you may change your approach. You can always change it, but or connect to current data catalogs with future ones. And then finally, number 4, you're going to start to select your vendor. You're going to create a short list of vendors that satisfy your mandatory requirements, probably 2 to 3. Don't overwhelm yourself. Determine what the nice-to-haves are and put them to one side for the moment. You're going to do a proof of concept, perhaps with a very small short list. If there's a tie, that's when you start to bring in the nice-to-haves. If these 2 catalog vendors are number 1 and 2 equally, then let's bring in the nice-to-haves and see which one's going to win there. And, of course, your budget as well. Then get the training, get the support from that vendor. You ingest the metadata at this point. You prioritize your sources and ingest them first. You configure the data sources for the metadata extraction or its virtualization if you're going to do that route. You depend on the catalog's functionality to automate many of the needed capabilities. That's where you really get a nice boost in productivity. Data lineage tracking, sensitive data detection, natural language processing, all these things can really help boost productivity. If manual intervention is needed, and in most cases it will be to a greater or lesser degree, then those also need to be configured as well. Number 6 is build the glossary, the business glossary. If one doesn't exist, then you're going to start to create it. You associate the glossary with the technical assets, and you start to add context, the color commentary, the collaboration, if you will. And you're going to leverage the artificial intelligence or machine learning to automatically create those associations. Number 7? Oh, number 7 is so critical. You don't stop with just the technical metadata. You expand it, you enrich it, you curate it, you organize the data catalog. You're going to use your AI, ML capabilities wherever to discover data domains, to tag with custom attributes, to catalog or organize the data, to allow the data stewards or the subject matter experts to add their certifications, their comments. Use this data in this case, use the data when this happens, or these have been certified as being trusted reports or dashboards or whatever it is. And then number 8, you finally put it into production. And this is a big step because the first one there is to set up the real-time updates to the metadata. As soon as you put it into production, you have to immediately begin to coordinate the updates because if it gets out of sync, people will lose faith in it. You set up change notifications. If something has happened upstream, then warn your business community. Warn the people using these pieces of data. You're going to secure the catalog, of course, set it up via user groups or whatever. Another critical piece is the training and education regarding the catalog itself. When do I use it? How do I use it? Who do I go to get permission and so forth? And then if you can, set up some kind of Q&A functionality. Number 9, capture and share the crowdsourced knowledge. It's what a lot of people call tribal knowledge. If I'm very familiar with the data, then I'm also very familiar with some of its problems and some of the questions that I had to answer. Can I do this with it? Is it suitable for this purpose? How good is the quality? Should I use this algorithm or that algorithm? All these sort of bits and pieces of crowdsourced inputs, the value of the data, the certifications, the ratings. If I know and trust someone who creates a lot of dashboard widgets for me, then I'm going to rate them 5 stars. I want other people to know that I trust this guy. And things to watch out for. All those are incredibly important pieces of information in your catalog. Number 10 is also critical. Monitoring the catalog's usage. Who's using what? You develop statistics, reports, and dashboards about the statistics, the reports, and the dashboards, and who's using it. Providing that visibility into the user, the trends in data usage. How often are they using the data? When do they use it? What problems have they run into? Who's the biggest collaborator? You use that information to better understand the catalog's usage, its value, and of course, its impact on the business community. Number 11 is my plea for sanity. Please don't lose sight of the enterprise. Your first project may be for a very small piece of a department, but don't stop there. The catalog is an enterprise resource, and that's just the first of many projects. You have to implement a fully functioning data catalog to get the full value of it. The data catalog itself is not a standalone. It has to fit into the broader metadata management, master data management, data governance, whatever you've got going for you there. So make it part of the bigger data management function itself. All right, final thoughts here. Metadata, boy, pretty critical source of information for everybody, not just business users, not just technical people, but both. It has not been well supported in the past. We had weird ways of collecting it. It was in spreadsheets. It was in some sort of access database, for heaven's sake. No one could determine the right data for their purposes. And it was very frustrating to use. It was redundant, repetitious, or in many cases out of date. Today, though, with the sophisticated data catalog, boy, oh boy, the world has changed. It is one of the brightest spots in analytics today, my opinion. And it is so much more than just metadata. I hope I've convinced you that it's so much more than just metadata. Certifications, ratings, collaboration, context. But again, the data catalog project will be less successful if it's buried inside of a department and they don't think of the full enterprise and its need for all this valuable information. So again, keep thinking, enterprise-wide, that's what you want. All right. With that, I will turn it back over to you, Linda, and I'm so looking forward to hearing from Aaron and Alation about their offering. So with that, I'll shut up. Do submit your questions, as always. And Linda, it's all yours.
Hey, thanks, Claudia. Yes, as Claudia said, a quick reminder to the audience, we welcome your questions. I know Claudia in particular enjoys hearing from our attendees. So if you have a question, send it over. On that note, please welcome our next speaker, Aaron Kalb, who is co-founder and chief data officer with Alation. Aaron has spent his career working at the intersection of humans, technology, and language to help people satisfy their curiosity and make more rational decisions. At Alation, which he co-founded in 2012, Aaron serves as chief data officer with the mission of promoting data culture within the company and around the world. Prior to Alation, he worked on Siri at Apple Computer in the Advanced Development Group. He holds a BS and an MS from Stanford in symbolic systems. His honors thesis was on language and logic. His master's thesis was on machine translation. So welcome, Aaron. Good to have you here.
Linda, thank you so much for that introduction. And Claudia, couldn't have teed it up better. Really a pleasure doing these things with you. As Claudia said, there's 11 steps to getting started with a catalog, and step 4 is to select the right vendor for you. As you can imagine, I have a bias toward Alation, and what I'm going to do, I don't have an agenda slide, but I'm going to basically go through the same outline that Claudia went through in terms of benefits, use cases, and getting started, and for each one, simply talk about how the Alation Enterprise Data Catalog differentiates for that, so you can make your own assessment about whether the Alation catalog is the right one for your organization. I'll also say that I've been, as Claudia was talking, I was both listening and looking at the questions coming in, and they've been excellent, so keep those coming. Okay, so to start, I'm going to talk about our differentiated features for each of those benefit statements from TDWI that Claudia teed up so nicely. So first of all, again, with benefits 1, 2, and 3, some of the sub-bullets there are about search-based interfaces that incorporate natural language processing, that connect to and catalog data in place and enable data discovery over those assets, and they can recognize patterns using ML and AI to find sensitive data, again, for accessibility, democratization, and protection and securing of data. So I found one screenshot I can't do a demo in this tool, but this screenshot I think captures everything on the left all at once. This is our heterogeneous unified search interface, and we describe this as helping our users to find data of any type, in any place, with any name by searching in plain English. Let me unpack that and show you what you're seeing here. First of all, in terms of any type, we will catalog all different types of data, including the weird data Claudia was describing earlier, data that might sit in file systems and key value stores, certainly data that sits in relational databases, whether that's from Teradata, Oracle, SQL Server, Vertica, you name it, Snowflake, increasingly these days. It can be in any place, on-prem, on cloud, in the cloud, hybrid, you name it. It can be, a column or a business glossary term. All of those different data assets and information assets will appear in this list. And the cool thing is it can be under any name. You just search in plain English. So if you look at this slide here, what you'll notice is the users typed in social security number, and they see the business glossary term, social security number up top. They see, if you see the gear, that's what's called a smart set, which is the kind of package of all social security numbers that exist today, plus ones that might come to exist in the future under that definition. I'll talk about that more later. But what I want to highlight here, if you look at the yellow highlights, is these are several different columns that all store social security numbers, but using different physical names. You see social security number with no vowels up top, and with no M either, NBR. We see social security number written out with underscores, and then we see SSN, which I should have highlighted there, and SOCSEC-NUM. And all of those are showing up, even though I typed in social security number. And that's leveraging some of the machine learning that we use to figure out kind of what the physical name translates to in natural speak. And this is an example of how you can not only empower end users to find what they're looking for and work faster, but use the same technology to recognize patterns, to find sensitive data, and discover all examples of social security number, which is, of course, PII that you want to protect and govern. So that's some of the benefits there. These are different sub-bullets for those same first two that to make data accessible, we have improved metadata, and we democratize data with crowdsourcing. And to kind of show how that works in Alation, I'm going to walk you through sort of layers of metadata that are populated in a few different ways and that cover a few different types of metadata. So we think of metadata as including technical metadata, the data type, creation date, things like that. Business metadata, and here's what this is used for. Here's how this ties into our business logic and the business glossary. And then behavioral metadata, which I'll explain more as we go through. But you can think of this as sort of like in Google Maps. There's the satellite view, there's the street names, there's the traffic, where people are driving and how many are there. And then there's stuff you might get from Waze, there's a traffic stop here, that kind of thing. And same thing with the data catalog. We have data that comes automatically from source systems using cool technology, and then curation done by humans, both experts and lay people on top of that. So the following series of screenshots sort of illustrates this process. Right now, this is not a bug. When you are a data analyst, or data scientist, or business user, and you see a data source for the first time, it's sort of confusing, it's blurry, it's out of focus, and each layer of metadata we add brings it into focus, adds color, makes it clear what's going on. So the first thing that any catalog will do is what we call metadata extraction, get that kind of physical layer, a satellite view of the data, and that's things like, okay, here's a table, what are the columns in it, what are the physical types of those columns, what schema is this table in, and all of that is just technical metadata that's somewhat helpful. Then we can do data sampling, and here you can see some sample rows and columns. And of course, this is all subject to data privacy things you can set. Here's where things get interesting. So the prior two things I showed, most modern catalogs will give you those. We uniquely will do that auto-titling with ML and NLP to see, if you recall the Social Security example. Here's another one. This is a medical data set, and it expands sum to summary and DRG to diagnosis-related groups, helps you find what you're looking for, understand what you're looking at. Better yet, we then do what we call query log ingestion, where we parse all the logs of all the queries that have been executed against this table in this case, whether those are written in SQL or executed behind the scenes when you're dragging and dropping in Tableau or Power BI or what have you. And this is more like a traffic view. I'll advance so you can see what's going on. Things that we get by not only ingesting but parsing that query log and running it through our behavioral analysis engine, we get things like popularity. Earlier, Claudia was talking about wanting the frequency and recency of use. Back when I was at Apple, we called this a frequency metric. That's a really good way to know what's important, what's interesting. I can also figure out who's used it in particular. That can be useful to figure out, okay, what department is this data relevant to? Do I trust those people? I can click on any of their names to figure out things about their reputation and what else they've used. And then the overlays there are what I would see if I were to click through those tabs running across the top in Alation Catalog. Things like what this data has been joined with, what it's been filtered by, or the common geographic codes, the demographic information that we use to slice and dice this data, as well as you can see a little snapshot of the lineage to know where it came from. So a lot of the things Claudia described, you can then get from this behavioral layer. And again, this and the our titling on the prior build are things that no other catalog will give you. And then lastly, is crowdsourcing and expert sourcing. So everything you see here, you get automatically on day one by just running some background processes overnight. And then on day two, you have humans come in and add more richness with business metadata. And you have complete customization over who can edit what metadata. There's also, you can have conversations about anything here and edit metadata collaboratively. So a mixture of sort of lay business users and designated experts like data stewards, data owners can come in and add these annotations. And the one that's highlighted here at the top left is this idea of what we call flags, using a stoplight metaphor we'll follow up on later. So the stoplight idea is red means stop, don't use this, we call that a deprecation. Green is an endorsement, go ahead, full speed ahead. And yellow is a warning, which is saying proceed with caution. There's some caveats about appropriate data use. So I'll hold that thought, we'll get back to it. So with that, a sequence of slides showed is, again, improved metadata and crowdsourcing to help achieve those benefits of accessibility and data democratization. Now moving on from more of the access side of things to really talking about protecting the data, securing the data, ensuring proper use of the data, and building trust in the data. We'll talk about automation of large sets, like with smart sets like I was showing earlier, where you can say every social security number, no matter where it lives or how it's encoded, needs to be secured. And in the next slide, I'll show a bit of this idea of taking those flags, those green and red lights, endorsement deprecations we were talking about, and propagating them to downstream objects, which really ties into the to the impact analysis use case Claudia was describing, and then really taking that to the end user, what we call guided navigation, what Claudia was calling real-time impacts with a tool we call Trust Check. And all these things work across different tools and sources. So pictures are worth thousands of words. I'll move along here. So this is showing this idea that everything that's relevant to the end user is surfaced just in time. And here's a place where we have table deprecations getting propagated to downstream objects, in this case including Tableau dashboards, which is very important for somebody who's asking in the questions about Tableau's catalog and how we relate. So maybe we'll get to that later. But what this shows is a table on the left is deprecated, underlying table. That table is used to create a view, but with a different table. And that view is used in one of the 4 sheets that are in a Tableau dashboard. And that red line shows the data quality issue that was highlighted upstream, flowing downstream, like pollution in a river, has downstream effects. And now the person who's consuming that Tableau dashboard and might make a bad business decision based on it can see that and do the right thing and avoid a mistake with this deprecation propagation. Here's another way we can have that real-time impact on use with guided navigation. This shows our query tool, Alation Compose. And remember before when we had all the social security numbers with different names, we can say, okay, they're in a smart set. Every social security number is sensitive. Don't misuse it. And that PII warning will now appear right in the moment when I'm typing my query and potentially going to make a compliance mistake, just like spell check can keep you from making a spelling mistake. But here the stakes are even higher. So that there was showing, again, protecting, securing data, trust in data using some unique Alation features. And finally, on the benefits that Claudia walked through, modern catalogs provide a bridge to analytics. They interface with the analytics solutions being used and improve that self-service capability. And so here I'll show again, whether you're more of a layperson like Claudia was describing, who just wants to look at a dashboard, maybe a dashboard with parameters just to see what's going on the one end, or on the other end, somebody who's actually writing their own SQL query who's more technical, we can help with both of those. Quick example here, we call this guided navigation. Sort of if you imagine the catalog is the map for your data, this is the turn-by-turn directions based on where you are and where you want to go. So the same way your GPS will say turn left at the light to get to the destination you entered, here I've written some SQL, and then I type an MAL as an indication of what I want, what my intent is, and it will then say, okay, that could be a filter by gender to male or by country code to Malta or Malawi or Mali. And again, the semantic search helps me write the correct query by leveraging information from the catalog. And same thing here, this is on Tableau Server. So here we see the same Tableau data source, and this can work on other BI tools as well, where you specify 3 Alation stewards have endorsed this dashboard, and that this Tableau data source, that information shows up right in Tableau. So even if the person doesn't even know Alation exists, they're just using Tableau, they can make sure they're directed toward the trustworthy data sources and can avoid the untrustworthy ones. So I'm going to go through this real quick because I want to leave 5 at least minutes for all your questions. So I'm just going to very quickly highlight these use cases, the 8 that Claudia said, and a few customer examples, because customer impact is super important to us as a value. This idea of finding data, reducing duplication, and disambiguating the mismatch reports, literally every single one of our customers describes those 3 as things that they want. I just threw up a slide that I present a lot when talking to customers and prospects, and literally people are just nodding so hard, I worry their heads are going to fall off as I go through this problem statement. And the one thing I'll highlight from this is that the 80% of the time scrounging, that 80-20 rule that Claudia was describing, we have had customers report they have flipped that around to have most of the time spent on actual analysis. And the same thing goes for onboarding of new data people. And likewise, instead of spending all this time reinventing the wheel and then getting results that don't match, we can change that into people finding each other's work, using it, and having more trust in the data. Very briefly, for the other 5 use cases, these are ones that don't apply to every single customer, but apply to many. I just want to share a few micro stories that have influenced our customers. One example being when Albertsons acquires Safeway, not only do they have to unify their data sets like Claudia was describing, they were actually able to take an innovative customer engagement program that Safeway had and then extend it to all of Albertsons very rapidly thanks to Alation. I'll quickly highlight a governance example. AmFam had a program running for 5 years with very little results, using more of a traditional top-down governance practice, and then leveraging the business glossary features and things like trust check that you saw. We're actually able to have a much better results and actually changing behavior in only 18 months. And it's especially exciting considering they're a highly regulated industry, obviously in insurance, and we're really excited to see that result. I probably don't have time to go through the rest of these. I'll just share one fun thing because it's here that impact analysis. Not only are many of our customers using the Alation functionality you saw and something you haven't seen yet to say, okay, if I deprecate this source because I'm moving it to Snowflake, who's going to be affected, and that sort of IT backend impact analysis. These 2 customers, an airline and a large energy company, were actually able to have some business impact analysis, where they were able to see, okay, how do solar panels on roofs and electric vehicles affect the grid? How does weather and other things impact downstream flight delays? And to use the Alation catalog to actually get to these real-world impacts and drive the business. So to wrap up in about a minute, Claudia ended by talking about getting started, and I want to show how we can do that process faster. If you recall her first slide there, again, this is copy-pasted and reformatted. She listed all these different types of metadata in a not quite exhaustive list. What I've done here is I put 2 at the top in bold and all the rest not in bold. And in this next slide, imagine all the not bold all going whoosh together. We call that typical technical metadata, all those different things. Every catalog has them, and I would argue that it is not nearly as helpful as what we call behavioral metadata. As a quick metaphor here, imagine you're on Amazon.com trying to buy books, and you have 2 books on the same topic, and for each one you get the ISBN number and the page count. That's technical metadata, not very helpful. Now imagine that one has an average of 1 star with 100 reviews, and the other has an average of 4.9 stars with 1,000 ratings. You know, that's what's really helpful. It's what people have done with it, what you can learn from them, especially automatically. So here on the right, you can see behavioral metadata, who's used it. That was the top users you saw on a previous slide. You can click through to find out their credibility, their department. Shown here at the right is that frequency metric, popularity, with frequency and recency of use. You can see here popularity descending. Here there's 49 tables in this schema. It's cut off here at the left, but in many cases there'd be literally hundreds of thousands of tables, and the same curve applies. The most used ones are used 10 times as much as the runner-ups, and there's a lot that aren't used at all. Extremely helpful to figure out what's relevant. And the last thing I'll show here, again with the Amazon metaphor, is that collaborative filtering idea. Customers who bought this book also bought that book. We do the same thing. People who use this data also use other data and use the data sets together to get better results. A very powerful thing. These are just some of the examples of things you can do with behavioral metadata, which again, no other catalog will give you. So finally, if I look at Claudia's final slide about getting started, these steps can all be daunting. The really exciting thing is steps 5 through 10, honestly, with Alation are this really nice feedback loop. The ingestion of metadata is automatic the first time. It's ongoing. Everything is kept in sync. The business glossary is automatically generated at first based on what occurs in the physical data. You can kind of delegate, prioritize, and incentivize the curation based on that usage curve we saw on the prior slide. And then when you put it into production, because you look at what's actually being used, you know you've got the right content, and you can use Alation University for training and Alation Analytics for monitoring what's being used, and have this really nice virtuous cycle where people are annotating the best stuff, and then as it gets more used, so the enterprise reaches its ultimate goals. So with that, I'll just invite everyone on the call to join our hundreds of production customers across various geographies and industries. Here's just a small sample of who we're working with here on this slide, and I hope you'll all join the extended Alation family. And with that, I'd love to team up with Claudia to answer your questions.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. Great job. Yeah, let's move in and see if we can blast through a few of these questions. I'm going to start with one for you, Aaron. Any example of graphical interfaces? Any connection to the graph theory? Can you address that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a great question because both sides are relevant. Sometimes we think of just a graphical user interface, like some of the screenshots you showed. It provides more of a WYSIWYG, comfortable environment that a business user can navigate, and we're working to make our environment even more easy to navigate from a UI perspective. But under the hood, there is a graph we have of all the people, all the data sources they use, the way they're using it, and that sort of social data graph, we sometimes call it, is what powers a lot of the differentiators you saw demonstrated.
Oh, that's great. We've got several questions around this idea of who owns and administers the data catalog. So, Claudia, I'm going to go to you on this one. Yeah, anyway, several questions around that. Who does own and administer that within a company? What do you see out there?
Yeah, well, I'm going to also invite, I'm going to put it on you too, Aaron, because I know you have so many examples. It really does depend on the organization. Certainly I would say the support of the catalog, its implementation, its maintenance, and so forth, connecting it up with the various tools and data sources and all of that, that's a very technical task, and it probably is done by either IT or line of business IT. I would prefer IT. That doesn't put into a single line of business. Keeps it enterprise focused. But in terms of a lot of the upkeep of the collaborative bits and all of that, so much of that is dependent on the business users and making sure that they are contributing their, as I say, tribal knowledge into this. The certifications can be part of the data stewardship function, but I think the overall maintenance of the product itself probably belongs in IT. Aaron, your thoughts on that?
No, I think you covered it really well. I mean, the one thing I'll say about this is we've actually seen transitions go in both directions. The common pattern we see is multiple departments adopting our catalog, and then IT coming in to offer one enterprise-wide license. But we're also increasingly seeing sort of business leaders tasked with data as separate from IT, with CDOs and CAOs and CDAOs often being our owners. So it really runs the gamut.
Aaron, how about this one? There seems to be a lot of data catalogs out there now. If we use Tableau, Tableau has a data catalog, for example. What's the benefit of using Alation on top of that?
That's an excellent question. And so we are actually close partners with Tableau. I had the pleasure of working with Francois, the Chief Product Officer at Tableau, as they were developing their catalog. And so there's basically two kinds of catalogs in the market. There's catalogs that are add-ons to existing tools, whether they're BI tools or database tools or ETL tools that catalog the things in that universe. And then there are enterprise data catalogs like Alation that catalog every single source and connect the dots between them. So, it's great that all these companies are adding catalogs to their system. Most large enterprises also need an enterprise catalog. And just to highlight one differentiator from Tableau's catalog will tell you, okay, here's this measure or dimension in the Tableau data source, and here are the Tableau dashboards it's used in. But in the screenshot I showed, where it traces from an underlying data issue identified by a sysadmin or an analyst, that goes from that table to a view into Tableau, the Tableau catalog wouldn't cover that depth, whereas the Alation catalog would. So that's an example of why it's sort of better together than just Tableau on its own.
Yeah, makes sense. How about this one, Aaron? I'm going to run over a little bit because we have such great questions. Managing and maintaining the data catalog seems like a full-time dedicated role. Is that true?
So I want to answer that question in two ways, because some of our competitors talk about people, process, and technology, and are basically setting you up to spend even more on personnel than you are in the software. And one thing I've always believed since Apple is that really good technology should save a ton of human time. So I think, when you're doing it manually, you need many people full-time, and you still can't keep it up to date. When you use automation in smart ways, keeping the technical metadata and the behavioral metadata up to date is actually something that happens automatically while you're sleeping. That said, we have found that our most successful customers do have somebody like a webmaster, often called a project manager or program manager, who are responsible for things like figuring out which departments or teams to onboard into the system, how to set up incentive programs so folks are contributing high-quality content and doing so a lot. And what we've actually done is we've taken the best practices we've learned from our smartest customers and packaged it up with a set of services offerings, starting with something called a Right Start, to help drive that adoption and value on the human side, even though the software already gets a ton of automation on its own.
That's perfect, Aaron, and thank you so much. On that note, we need to wrap up here today. That was Aaron Kalb with Alation, joining Claudia Imhoff with Intelligent Solutions. Thank you again to Alation for sponsoring today's webinar. I want to remind everyone we did record it, and we'll be emailing you a link to the archive. And finally, quick reminder that TDWI has all the latest research reports, webinars, and information on business intelligence, data warehousing, and a host of related topics. Much of it is free of charge. I encourage you to tap into all of that expertise. It's at tdwi.org. And on that note from all of us here today, thank you very much for attending. This concludes today's event.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.